You were not born to conform, you were born to awaken. This is not a motivational slogan. It is a sacred summons echoing from the deepest chambers of your soul. You may not have realized it, but ever since childhood, you've sensed that something in this world felt off, as if you were playing a role, smiling, obeying, trying to fit into frames constructed long before you arrived. And yet behind all of it, a quiet part of you rebelled, a whisper in the dead of night. This isn't me. In an age where everything urges you to blend in, to comply, to seek validation from without, your very sense of alienation is a precious sign. Carl Jung called it the uprising of the self, when your soul refuses to keep performing the roles assigned by the persona, the mask you wear to survive. Have you ever wondered why, despite doing everything right, you still feel empty? Why even with friends, a job, and goals, your soul feels as if it has fallen asleep? It's because you were not born merely to exist or to succeed by someone else's definition. You were born to remember who you are, to begin the journey of individuation, the path toward becoming a whole, unique, unrepeatable human being. And that journey always begins with a crisis. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung recounts the moment he faced himself in the darkness of his own soul. He did not search for light outside, but turned inward into dreams, into strange symbols, into the pages of his red book. He called it the confrontation with the unconscious, the place where all the forgotten parts of our soul dwell. If you're feeling lost, wounded, or beginning to question everything you once believed to be true, congratulations. You are standing at the threshold of awakening. It is not easy, but it is real. It is not gentle, but it is necessary. And the first thing you must know is this: you are not alone. The emotions you carry, the inner conflict, the sadness, the inexplicable rage are not mistakes. They are signals. They are gateways to an inner world where darkness and light are no longer enemies, but begin to reconcile. So what is keeping you from awakening? It is the shadow, the part of yourself you fear to look at, the one you dare not touch. And that is where we must begin. Because to awaken, you must pass through the very part of you that you've long denied. Stay with me. In the next part, we will journey into the shadow, the place where your soul has been hidden and where you will begin to find yourself again. Modern life and the loss of the original self. You might call this moment emptiness, disorientation, or a nameless exhaustion, or as Carl Jung once wrote, a summons from the soul. We now enter the first phase of awakening, where crisis does not arrive to destroy you, but to show you this: you no longer belong to the old world. There is a kind of pain that has no name. It does not cut the skin or draw blood, but pulses like a persistent knock from the depths within. It's the feeling of doing everything right, graduating, getting a job, falling in love, curating a beautiful life on social media, only to wake up one morning feeling like a stranger in your own life. Carl Jung once wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents. But the truth is, we carry more than just our parents' unlived lives. We carry an entire societal structure, an invisible legacy of expectations, beliefs, morals, and roles, without ever stopping to ask, is this truly me?" From an early age, we are taught to comply. Be a good kid. Stop crying. That's not pretty. Make your parents proud. To be loved, you must obey. And so we learn to betray ourselves in order to be accepted. We put on the persona, the social mask, as Jung described, to survive. Eventually, that mask becomes our default face, and at some point, we forget what our real face even looks like. Look at modern society. Depression rates are rising even though material life has never been more abundant. Young people feel increasingly alone, lost, and unsure of themselves. We chase meaning through self-improvement, productivity, and mindset, but the more we improve, the more exhausted we become. Can you feel it? Your soul doesn't want to become a better version. Your soul wants to return. Jung never advocated for abandoning society or escaping into the woods. He didn't tell you to quit your job, leave your family, or drop your responsibilities. What he did say is this: if you live disconnected from your soul, everything you do, no matter how right, will feel empty. So how do we reconnect? By listening to what Jung called spiritual hunger, the kind of hunger that cannot be satisfied with money, status, or shallow relationships. This hunger is your soul trying to speak, and often it arrives as a crisis, burnout, heartbreak, confusion, a sense of meaninglessness. This is where you are invited into the first stage of the journey, a conversation with your true self. Don't rush toward answers. Jung taught that what you need is not the answer, but the capacity to live the question. And you are not alone on this path. Pause for a moment. Ask yourself, Who was I before I learned to be good? What do I truly need, not what I was taught to need? When I am completely silent, what part of me is trying to whisper? If these words resonate, if you feel like you're reading your own thoughts, then you are not alone. We are building a community of fellow travelers on the path of individuation, the return to the original soul, where every person is seen, heard, and allowed to be their true self. Leave a comment, I am on the journey home. Read the stories of others, perhaps you'll find someone who shares your frequency. So what caused us to lose touch with our soul? What lurks in the hidden corners of the psyche, quietly shaping our lives from behind the scenes? In the next part, we will enter the mysterious realm Jung called the shadow, the place that holds everything we've denied and rejected, and where, paradoxically, the key to awakening is hidden. Are you ready to face the part of yourself you've long avoided? Stay with me. The next chapter might be the very door your soul has been waiting to open. The shadow, the darkness that was never accepted. Dear soul, if in the previous part you began to hear the quiet whisper of your soul, then now we enter a deeper, more unsettling realm of the journey, the shadow. Not the evil from horror movies, not something alien. The shadow is you. It is every part of yourself you once rejected, were ashamed of, tried to hide, and yet it still lives within you, yearning to be seen. Carl Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. But society has taught us to deny what is not beautiful. From childhood, we are praised for being obedient, gentle, talented, sociable. But anger, jealousy, selfishness, fear, weakness, these were labeled bad, wrong, unacceptable. So you learn to push them down, to bury them, to pretend I'm fine. But do you know what happens to the parts of you that are denied? They don't die. They become the shadow, and from the unconscious, they begin to shape your life in secret. Have you ever wondered why you overreact during a simple argument? Why you repeat painful patterns in love? Why you smile on the outside but secretly envy others' success? Or why you blame others while deep down knowing something in you remains unresolved? These are all signs that your shadow is active. And here's the cruel paradox: the part of you that you've denied is the part that needs your love the most. Jung did not say the shadow is evil, quite the opposite. He believed the shadow holds gold, raw, vibrant, creative potential. But to find that gold, you must be willing to dig, to enter the dark cave, to face the fear of rejection, of pain, of being exposed. The journey of awakening does not begin with light. It begins with the courage to walk into the dark. Ask yourself, what traits in others trigger me the most? What part of myself do I constantly hide from the world? When was the last time I truly felt not good enough? It's through these questions that you begin to uncover your own shadow. Not to punish yourself, but to restore your wholeness, to become a person of both light and shadow. One of Jung's clients once dreamt he was desperately trying to climb out of a deep well. Exhausted and hopeless, he believed freedom was above. But Jung asked, what would happen if you went down instead of up? The man sat in silence. That was a pivotal moment. Jung did not teach you to rise, to stay positive, or to become a better version. He taught you to go down, to go inward. Because at the bottom of the well, you will find the lost parts of your soul, and that is the key to healing. If you feel you're facing your shadow, you don't have to do it alone. Leave a comment, I am entering my shadow. We are building a space where people can share their darkness safely without judgment, because we are all learning to accept not just our beauty, but our brokenness. Read the stories of others. You might see yourself reflected in theirs. So what happens after you face the shadow? Is awareness enough? No, that is only the beginning. The next phase of the journey brings forth the archetypes, the ancient symbols of the collective unconscious, the mother, the hero, the wanderer, the trickster, the child. And most of all, anima and animus, the feminine within the man, and the masculine within the woman, emerge to guide you further on the path of awakening. In the next chapter, we will explore how these archetypes rise from the depths, through dreams, emotions, love, and art, and why an encounter with the anima can dismantle an entire old life. Are you ready to meet your soul in symbolic form? Stay with me. What comes next may be your first true encounter with yourself. The awakening archetype, the encounter with anima, or animus. Dear soul, if in the previous chapter you found the courage to face your shadow, the disowned darkness within, then this moment marks a turning point. Because when you enter the dark, when the old masks dissolve, when the former selves no longer control you, something sacred begins to emerge. Carl Jung called it the encounter with the archetypes, living images from the deepest layer of the collective unconscious, where all of humanity is mysteriously connected beyond time and culture. Jung believed that each person carries an inner opposite. A man holds the anima, the feminine soul within him, intuitive, emotional, receptive, creative. A woman holds the animus, the masculine soul within her, logical, active, analytical, directional. You may have already met them without knowing. They appear in strange dreams, in magnetic, inexplicable relationships, in music, in film, in poetry that touches a part of you you can't quite name. Anima, animus are not your lovers, they are your soul. Once the shadow is seen, this archetype arises as a guide. They often appear when you're lost, when the old life no longer fits, but no new path is in sight. And they rarely speak in words, they speak in images. A dream of a mysterious woman bathed in blue light, a man emerging from darkness offering you a staff, a single glance in the mirror that makes your chest tighten. This is not fantasy, it is life stirring from within. One of Jung's clients, a writer, often dreamt of a silent woman in the forest. She stood at a distance saying nothing, but with each dream she came closer. One day she handed him a quill. Soon after he began to write things, even he didn't understand words that would later heal thousands. His anima had spoken. In daily life, anima and animus may manifest through profound relationships, people who feel like magnets to your soul, as if you've known them in another lifetime. This isn't ordinary love, it's a soul calling. But if you're not aware of this inner symbol, you may project it onto the other and demand that they fulfill your soul's unfinished longing. This leads to heartbreak. You fall in love with an inner image, not a real person. Jung warned, if you cannot recognize anima as an inner archetype, you will be possessed by your own enchantment. You will love, then be disillusioned. You will worship, then despair. Because you are not loving them, you are loving a part of yourself that remains unintegrated. This is why meeting anima or animus is such a sacred moment in the journey. Not to avoid love, but to transform it into a bridge toward the self, the wholeness of your being. Ask yourself, is there someone who often appears in my dreams? Have I ever been drawn to someone so powerfully it felt like losing control? Have I ever felt a part of me living inside another person? If yes, you may have arrived at the threshold of anima or animus. And this is not something to fear. It is a sign you are moving deeper into the truth of who you are. If you've ever had a strange dream, a haunting love, or been moved to tears by a single image in art, share it with us. Comment, I have met my anima, Jushan animus. We are creating a space for people to tell their spiritual stories. No judgment, no interpretation, only deep listening and sacred witnessing. Because your soul deserves to tell its own story. Once you've met the anima or animus, what comes next? You cannot return to your old life. Something inside you has opened. And now, you begin the most painful sacred process of all, the dissolution of the old self and the rebirth of the soul. In the next chapter, we will enter holy ground, where the false self must die so the true self can be born. Jung called it spiritual rebirth. Are you ready to let go of the person you thought you were, to become the soul you've always been? Keep going. The next part may be the turning point of your destiny. Spiritual rebirth, the death of the old, the birth of the true. Dear soul, here is a sacred paradox. You can only be reborn if you are willing to let part of yourself die. Not a physical death, but a symbolic one. The death of illusions, outdated identities, inner scripts you once believed were you, but no longer are. Carl Jung called this process rebirth, spiritual transformation. It is perhaps the most vital part of awakening, breaking down the old to make space for something sacred to be born. After facing your shadow, after the archetypes begin to speak, you cannot go back to who you were. A stirring begins from within. You want to let go of what no longer feels true. You feel the urge to clear space in your soul for something not yet defined, but profoundly real. And that's when the ego, the part of you that needs control, starts to panic. You feel torn. One part of you wants to keep the safe job. Another feels utterly disconnected from it. You still love that person, but you're no longer the same self that once fit that relationship. You go to work, see friends post smiling photos, but inside something is cracking. Jung described this as death before death, a deep inner earthquake, and you cannot rush through it. You must endure it like a mother endures labor pains to give birth to new life. Rebirth doesn't happen in the light. It begins in the deepest dark, when you're curled up, unsure of who you are. When you feel no drive, no clear goals. when you doubt everything, even yourself. But in that breaking the self, your whole sacred identity begins to rise. Imagine your soul as a forest burned to the ground. Everything familiar has turned to ash. You stand there surrounded by loss. But then, a tiny green sprout pushes through the soil. Then another, a soft flicker of light from within. Not dazzling, but real. This is rebirth. Not loud, not glamorous, but so profound you will never return to who you were. Jung wrote of an ancient image deep in the human psyche. The phoenix, the bird that sets itself on fire, then rises from the ashes reborn, stronger, purer. This isn't just a myth. It's your soul's memory. It is your symbol. Ask yourself, what in me is asking to be released, but I keep clinging to? What am I suffering through that my soul is actually trying to heal? Am I willing to let a part of me die so a more authentic self can live? If you're in the midst of this inner collapse, know this, you are not alone. Come and I am in the process of rebirth. And if you've walked through this valley before, share your story. Someone standing at the beginning may need to know they're not walking it alone. Our community is not for the perfected. It's for those who are honest with their becoming. Rebirth is not the end, it's the beginning. Because once you start living from a more truthful self, you'll face the final challenge. How to integrate all your inner parts into a whole unified being. Jung called this final phase individuation, the becoming of the self. No longer seeking validation, no longer chasing ideals that aren't yours, but simply living as a soul who knows who they are. In the next chapter, we'll enter the deepest territory yet, where the journey is no longer about seeking, but about being. Are you ready to stop becoming someone and start being you? Keep going. The next part is the one your soul has been waiting for all along. Individuation, the journey of becoming yourself. Dear soul, if you've journeyed through the shadow, if you've met the archetypes, if you've walked through the fire of rebirth, then now you stand at the final threshold individuation, the path of becoming who you truly are. But this is not a destination. It is a way of being, a state of presence where you no longer ask, who should I be? Instead, you begin to live as the one you've always been, deep beneath the noise. Carl Jung taught that each of us carries within a self, whole, original, and utterly unique. But the self does not arrive through striving. It does not appear through perfection. The self emerges only when you dare to live truthfully, when you integrate every part of who you are, the light and the shadow, the rational and the emotional, the wounds and the wisdom. Individuation is that process, not becoming what society wants, not fulfilling your family's script, not mimicking culture's ideals, but simply becoming yourself. In this journey, you don't become better, you become whole. You no longer deny your shadow, you invite it to the table. You no longer chase anima or animus, you listen to them as inner guides. You no longer hide behind persona, you live as if no mask is needed. And most importantly, you live consciously. No longer swept away by automatic reactions, inherited patterns, or external pressures. You pause, you observe, you listen, you choose. Jung described individuation as a spiral. You return to yourself again and again, but each time from a deeper layer with clearer awareness. You do not overcome fear, you learn to live with it. You do not destroy the ego, you learn to love it in its proper place. You do not eliminate emotion, you learn to hear what it's trying to say. Ask yourself, am I living as a reaction or as a conscious choice? Am I trying to prove something, or am I living what I truly believe? If I were no longer afraid of rejection, failure, or misunderstanding, how would I live? Many awaken but fall back asleep. Why? Because they don't know how to live with their awakening. They think understanding the shadow or meeting anima is enough. But the truth is, individuation is a lifelong path. And it's not easy, because living authentically will always make you different. You'll no longer say yes to what you don't agree with. You'll begin to step away from hollow conversations. You may feel alone, but you'll no longer feel lonely. Why? Because you found something few ever do, a real connection to yourself. And when you have that, you begin to live from a quiet, steady power. No need to prove. No need to explain. Just presence. You don't need to complete the journey to speak your truth. You only need to be on the path. Comment, I am living my journey. And if you ever feel like retreating or giving up, read the words of others. Sometimes a single sentence is enough to help you stay. This community isn't for the enlightened. It's for those who are brave enough to live honestly, even while still becoming. You may have crossed many thresholds from confusion to confrontation to rebirth to embodiment. But one question remains: how do you carry your awakening into the ordinary world? How do you stay awake? At the supermarket, in your inbox, in a relationship that's still healing. How do you turn wisdom into action and soul into reality? In the final chapter, we will return not to start over, but to live each day fully as a soul who has finally been named. Are you ready to stop knowing the self and start living from it? Keep going. The next part is the breath that turns understanding into transformation. The soul's calling. Dear soul, if you're still here listening to these final words after this long journey, then congratulations. Not because you understand it all, but because you stayed with yourself. You've had the courage to face your shadow, to listen to the whisper of the soul, to meet the deep archetypes within, and to surrender what no longer serves you in order to be reborn. And now you are no longer who you once were. No one needs to confirm it. You can feel the quiet shift within. Carl Jung once said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. The greatest privilege isn't success. It isn't happiness by society's standards. It is to become yourself. And if today you begin to live with that awareness, then you are healing not only yourself, but the collective. Because every soul who remembers who they are becomes a light for others still wandering in the dark. You don't need to start a revolution. You don't need to quit your job, leave your family, or change everything. You just need to take one small, honest step each day. A moment of stillness amidst the noise where you truly hear yourself. A single no said with love because you honor your own boundaries. A gentler gaze toward the part of you that was once rejected. That is shadow work. That is awakening. That is the quiet but profound return to the soul. And if you feel moved, stirred, or deeply at peace right now, don't let this fade. Do something to anchor this moment. Comment, I am becoming myself. Share a piece of your journey. You never know, your story might be the light someone else needs. If this video touched you, send it to someone you care about. No explanation needed. Just say, I think you should see this. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel, do it now as a promise to yourself. A promise that you will continue this journey, that you will no longer sleepwalk through your roles, that you are here to live, not just to survive. Every week will return, not with quick fixes, but with deeper openings, not to improve you, but to help you remember you. The end of this video is not the end of the journey. It's just a turning point. You'll return to your life, your work, your relationships, but this time, you'll return with a new light in your eyes. Hold on to that light, trust it, and if you ever forget, you can always return here, to this space, where we the awakening souls are always waiting for each other. See you in the next video, where we won't just talk about the self, we'll begin learning how to live from the soul.